welcome to the Airborne Canine podcast. This is Kelly Ortega. I'm with the owner of Airborne Canine, Ashley Jacobson, who is forcibly making me do this intro.
You're doing such a good job.
Thank you. I don't feel like I am. Today we're going to talk about some training fundamentals, like the bare basics that we're teaching clients so that they understand what concepts we're teaching their dogs. Real quick, our usual little laundry list of items. I believe the dock diving season has come to a close for us, correct?
The dock diving trial season is over.
Okay.
For the most part, unless we really want to travel, but we will not. So we are done trialing this season. However, we are still practicing. Training never ends. But yeah, the trial season has come to a close.
R.I.P. My back will be healing from vending and carrying totes till the next event.
I love it.
Don't forget to check out all of our social medias, Airborne Canine on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok. We also have our own personal TikToks you can probably find through our names, as well as personal Instagrams and fun stuff like that. We're very traceable around here.
Yep, we are super transparent too, so if anybody wants to follow us, go ahead and follow us.
Occasionally too transparent, but you know what? You sign up for it.
You get what you ask for.
Do we have any events coming up right now?
God, not that I can think of.
I know
we're going to that seminar.
Yeah,
next weekend.
I'm super excited for that seminar.
So Kelly and I are going to the Ben Lipinski and the Lipinski Canine Training Services scent detection seminar next weekend. Where we are going to be learning about an area that we both are. Yes, Alba. My old lady Alba is walking around, so if you hear her little tippy tappies, that's her. I know I need to do her nails.
I was about to say, nail clippers?
I know. But yeah, we're going to be learning about a subject that we both are fairly novice at, and we want to be able to kind of have that higher level of expertise so that way we can pass that on to our clients. So we'll be doing that next weekend.
I'm so excited to bring my little floppy ear mutt into a room full of purebred working breeds.
You didn't know that?
I feel like it's going to be heavily Malinois.
Heavily like that. But I think that she is going to impress you and many of the other people there.
You say that, but she's going to pick that day as her day.
She's going to do great. I'm excited.
I anticipate the worst. But I'll be surprised by the best.
Yes. She's going to do fantastic. You're going to love it. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
Cool. So let's talk about the topic we're going to go over today. So like we said, we're going over the basics. So what we wanted to do today was really just kind of talk through why it's so important to understand the fundamental concepts of canine learning theory. And before you guys fall asleep when you hear the words canine learning theory, we're going to try and keep it practical, pragmatic, and useful so you can actually take some information and apply it, because we think that it's super important that you understand these concepts so that you can apply them, because you're using them. And so if you don't understand that you're using them, you can't use them as effectively as you possibly could. So we're going to kind of start from our beginning, where we start with every brand new dog training client. Most of our clients are either first-time dog owners, or they have a new puppy who has no training, or they have a dog from the shelter, and they come to us and we're getting them started from scratch. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And most of the clients that we have are basically they don't have any background in dog training, or if they do, it's from watching YouTube videos. And so they don't have any type of formal education. So what this is for kind of really understanding those simple concepts and making them useful in your day-to-day training with your dogs.
And if you feel like you already know these concepts and you're about to turn the podcast episode off, there probably will be a lot of pop quizzes, which is something I'm very bad at. So you should at least keep watching or I guess listening to hear me make an absolute fool out of myself, because I'm very bad at pop quizzes, and then I panic more because I know the information, but it's just all panic.
We had such a beautiful moment the other day, because I love giving Kelly her pop quizzes and asking her all of these topics and these fundamental concepts, and watching her struggle with them is my favorite part of my day. But now Kelly herself has an apprentice.
A pet apprentice.
Yes. So Kelly is still learning with me, but she is experienced enough at this point that she can continue to pass on information to a newer trainer as well. And it was the moment when I saw Kelly give the trainer a pop quiz, and I was like, yes, it has come full circle. I love it.
Yeah.
So
it's a painful experience to be on both sides of, I think. Because, like, I know where she's been, and I know that she's, like, panicking at the moment. I'm so sorry for putting her there, but she's not going to forget.
She will.
Yeah.
But
it's
still
okay.
Forget.
I forget, too.
It's okay. All right, so let's talk about, like, that client who comes in. Let's start with, like, the consultation. Like, they come in, and they tell us, hey, I'm having all these problems with my dog, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm free feeding my dog. They have all their toys out, and they're doing all the normal pet dog stuff that people do. What's the first kind of thing we do to help get them ready for like a training program, Kelly?
I tell them to put all of their toys up unless they're earning them through training with the dog, and kind of limiting that food too to where they're earning that through training, which kind of boils down to just like all good things happen as a result of the owner. Like it kind of comes through them. And even like at that point with the consultation, there's not a whole lot we can say, like go do, like, you said like new puppy or something. You're not going to tell that owner, go home and make the puppy sit and then feed it.
Right.
Like what are they here for at that point?
Yeah.
But just, even just attention, stuff like that.
Yeah. So when we're doing things like we're telling the client to, hey, put all the toys away. If you want to play with your dog, take out a toy, that's fine. But put the toys away. Don't let the dog just eat food whenever they want. Why are we doing that?
To kind of get the dog, used to like accepting things out of human hands. I feel like that's not something people really think about.
Yep. Because
I think they think, oh, I feed my dog table scraps out of my hand. The dog loves it. I'm like, kibble's not a potato chip.
Yeah.
And then they also, kind of start creating that currency.
Yeah. Yeah,
that working for something.
What are they working for, right?
Yeah.
So, that's going to be one of what we're going to call or refer to as the big three. So, Kelly, what's one of the big threes that we're talking about right now?
Well, the one you're talking about is motivation.
Motivation. So, motivation is going to be one of the big threes. We're going to talk about the other two of the big three later on as well. And we are going to jump around a little bit, and we're going to talk about all these concepts, and we're going to keep coming back to them over and over because the big reason why these concepts are so important is because they never go away.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if this is your first day of training or if you're a world champion or if you've been training pet dogs or working dogs for 30, 40 years. These concepts never go away. So before we can do anything with the dog has to be working for something. The dog has to want something that we can provide in order to solicit behavior. So in this instance, we're starting to set up the conditions, the environment, the situation, so that the dog wants for something. So then we can start to create behavior. So another thing I like to have the client do before they even come in, and you're right, we can't have the client go home and try and teach sit or heel or anything like that because they're probably going to actually make some bad habits. The reason why they're here is because they're having trouble getting the dog to do these behaviors consistently. And so what I do like to have them do is something simple that we call marker conditioning. And I think that's something that, I can trust the client can do at home without causing any real problems. And so, when I do my marker conditioning, I like to do it with my clicker, but you can also do it with your verbal markers, whatever it is. And I have the client just go home and practice every single meal, just mark and feed. So if they're using the clicker, it'd be click and feed. Or if they're using their verbal, it'd be good and feed. And those are the two things we have them do before they even come in for their first lesson. Now, we don't really talk about like, hey, these are the concepts you're applying. This is, building motivation. This isn't, this is marker training. We don't go over those concepts because as soon as you start pulling out terminology, you'll see some people start to glaze over, especially like before we're even really doing anything.
Yeah.
But we do like to make sure they kind of understand that it is part of a bigger concept so that they're not thinking we're just kind of pulling stuff out of our asses. So let's say the client does a great job. They go home, they do all the structure we talk about, putting the toys away, having a structured feeding routine, having the dog in the kennel when they're not actively engaging, and they're doing a great job getting that marker conditioned, right? They finally get to come in, and let's say they're doing private lessons. This is mostly where these concepts are most important is because the client's going to be doing everything themselves. So in that first lesson, when the client first comes in, Kelly, where do you like to start with your first lesson?
So I like to start with what we call the attention game. That's basically where you just kind of have the client hold the handle of the leash around their wrist so the dog can't, yeet off into the road or anything. And then they're going to make a lot of little puppy sounds. When the dog looks, they're going to click and feed. So all they're worried about is clicking and feeding. And Ashley's laughing at me, and now I'm scared that I'm going to get, very embarrassed.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, that's going to be totally the goal. Like, the first lesson is the attention game, working up to that heel. But how many times has your client come in for their very first lesson and the dog doesn't want to take food?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah, it doesn't want to take food.
Yeah.
Or how many times does the dog come in and that marker's not conditioned yet?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the way that I do it that's wrong, but
It's not
usually
wrong.
that game is where I'm conditioning the clicker, whether or not the client's already conditioned that clicker, because what I think you're trying to talk about next is timing and consistency. So that's kind of bringing in that timing of I can kind of really be nitty-gritty, click, and then feed.
So before I ever even get into teaching that attention game, I have them show me their marker conditioning, if we've even talked about it before.
Okay.
If we haven't talked about it before, I have them just do marker conditioning, because we're going to talk about that timing, right? But in order for marker conditioning to work, so this is where we're going to start to talk a little bit about marker conditioning. Marker conditioning is where we take a marker, a sound, a clicker, the word good, whatever, and we teach the dog that the food is coming after they hear that sound.
Yeah.
Right? The only way that the dog is going to understand that concept is if the food does come after the sound.
Yeah.
And, I emphasize that because most of our clients who come in are going to struggle with waiting until after they've used their marker to actually then provide the food to the dog. A lot of times they're going to try and do it simultaneously. Some people even do it before and then click after, like, oh, I forgot to click. Here, let me click now. And so I like to just take that out of the concept, because once we start trying to get the dog to look at us, come to us, just good girl. Look at us, come to us, walk next to us, any of that sort of stuff, it's going to make everything else we do just so much more difficult.
Okay.
So the first thing I like to do is just make sure the client understands you mark, then you feed. And then we go into the attention game.
Okay.
So, timing will be important for sure, but we're not even going to really worry about that just yet.
Okay.
Timing is more important later when we start talking about using the marker to mark behavior.
So I've been waiting to catch that mistake that they're making, and then I stop them, and then I tell them why we use the marker, and I really kind of explain that, and then I send them back to do it. I don't know if that's the way you do it.
Yeah,
that's the way I've been doing it, because then they're thinking of why that mistake was wrong.
Mm-hmm. I really don't explain the why until after they're doing it correctly first.
Okay.
Because I find that if you explain the why too early, they overthink it, and then they try to get ahead of you almost. Okay. So I want to make sure they're doing it correctly first. Then I talk about why it's so important to do it correctly.
Yeah.
Because if you try to explain the why we do it a certain way, most often or not, they're going to jump ahead of you.
Yeah.
Because if you tell, hey, we're doing this, so the dog will end up doing this eventually, they're going to try and shortcut the dog to that end solution instead of just doing it correctly in the first place.
Oh, see, I just tell them, you can't feed as fast as that dog thinks. The clicker's marking it thinking, and then you have all the time to feed. That's what I mean by the why.
I like that phrase.
Yeah.
I like that. Very cool. All right, so then we get into the attention game. So what is the attention game?
Basically just kind of being more distracting than the environment until the dog pays attention to the handler and marking that behavior and rewarding it, which we do turn later into a different behavior, but I'm not trying to work ahead.
Yeah, totally. And so the whole name of the game is, hey, the dog's probably in a new place in our training facility. Maybe there's dog smells. Maybe there's dogs in kennels. Maybe there's, butterflies. Who knows? But we play a little game with the owner and their dog, and the owner just has to be more interesting than the environment around them. And we like to start out with the simplest behavior where as soon as the dog looks at the owner uses their marker, and then they feed.
Yeah.
So at this point in the training, this is where I start to talk about what's called positive reinforcement, right? So when we start talking about positive reinforcement, what is positive reinforcement?
Adding something the dog finds enjoyable to whatever marker you made. So it's I'm sorry. This is where it's like I know the information so well that my brain is like somersaulting over itself because it's like, oh my god, the quadrants of operant conditioning. Like, this is great.
It's okay. This is so good for you.
No, it's basically creating that consequence of adding that enjoyable experience.
Yeah, a good consequence.
Good. I just try to avoid the word pleasurable. I hate that word, and everyone uses that word.
That's an uncomfortable feeling.
I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so when the dog does something good, we give it something good.
Yeah, I'm gonna start crying by the end of this episode.
Don't cry. Oh my god, you're gonna upset Dante.
Dante's already upset. He was born upset.
So positive reinforcement just means when the dog does something we like, the target behavior, right? The name of the game is the attention game. When the dog gives us the attention, we give them something good, right? Now we are going to start to talk about timing, right? Because most dogs in the first few repetitions of this game don't know what we're asking of them, don't have a whole lot of history with paying attention to mom or dad, and that's obviously why they're there, because they're just more distracted by the world around them. So the moments that the dog is looking at the owner might be fleeting, right? So we got a very split second that we can kind of capture that moment, and that's where that marker and the marker timing is so important.
Yeah.
The other reason why the marker is so important so early on is because if we're trying to pay the dog for looking at us in the face, we can't convey that to them by feeding them without that marker. Because when they're eating, they're looking at the food, they're looking at our hand, they're looking at our treat pouch, right? That marker can capture that moment, the timing of that moment, where they're looking exactly where we want them to look.
Yeah.
And that way they're going to know exactly what behavior it was that got them that treat. Because hey, sometimes your hand gets caught on the pouch, or the pouch closes, or you drop a piece of kibble, or whatever.
Or you drop the whole pouch.
You drop the whole pouch sometimes, or it just dumps out for no reason whatsoever. And chaos happens, but, it might take a few seconds for you to get that food to the dog. But that clicker, that marker, is going to help the dog know exactly the moment that they did the thing that's going to get them the reward.
Yeah.
And that reward, that reinforcement, is that positive reinforcement. So, how does positive reinforcement work with training dogs?
Well, when you add something enjoyable to that behavior, it makes that behavior more likely to happen again.
Are you adding it to the behavior? Or are you providing it as a consequence after the behavior?
It's a consequence, but in my head, it makes sense in my brain.
Words mean things.
Stop
Words
saying
are
that.
so important.
Words don't mean anything. Like,
because
everything's a lie.
So the way that you just described it to me, you said, when I add the food to the behavior, it makes, the behavior happen more often.
Yeah.
Basically, you're saying that, you're eating and sitting at the same time. And that's not how it works. Consequence has to come after the behavior, right? So especially when we have clients who don't understand these concepts, these words are very important.
This is why I'm bad with clients.
This is why she's going to cry tonight.
This is why I'm going to cry later.
Yeah.
This is why I don't listen to our podcast. This is that's the reason why I won't listen to it. I refuse. Anyway, let me rephrase it.
Okay, go ahead. When
the behavior results in the dog getting something they enjoy or something that is pleasurable, they're more likely to repeat that behavior to re-get that consequence.
Yep.
Re-get. I don't know. Get the consequence again. Yum.
When a behavior results in a positive consequence, the behavior is likely to happen more frequently in the future. Words are hard, I know.
I get so excited about this stuff, though. Like, I feel like the more experience you get with training, the more the boring stuff is like, oh my god, I'm getting the little, tinglies. Like, this is so cool.
I know we've talked about this before, but the whole reason that we started this podcast is because we have conversations like this in the parking lot for, hours. Talking about, positive reinforcement, which is, the very, very beginning, the very, very tip of the iceberg of dog training. And, it's, yeah. So we're nerding out. It's okay. That's what we're here for. So we're using positive reinforcement to create or make this behavior happen more often, right?
Yeah.
So usually we do the attention game for several repetitions, and eventually the dog starts to figure out, when I look at mom, I get a treat, right? Awesome. So, what do we start to do from there?
Are you talking about teaching the heel?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to branch off if that's not where we're heading.
No, that's fine. That's usually where I go with it from there. So.
That's what I do too. So from there, we get the dog consistently returning back to us. This is something that's a lot easier for me to show the clients, so I'm not sure how my description is going to be.
Well, we don't have to tell people exactly how we get the dog to heel, but what are we trying to do at the next step of it?
We just start kind of gently shaping that into that picture of the heel, kind of turning to where the dog's on the left side, marking, and then feeding in that position.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and so at that point, we're still just using positive reinforcement, encouraging the dog to do the behaviors. We're not forcing the dog to be there. We're not using the leash to pull them into that behavior. But every time the dog ends up on our left-hand side, we mark, we reward. Ideally, we're looking for that attention throughout all of this. We want attention to be a huge part of all of the training we do, so we always start with that. But the first behavior that we're really trying to teach is that heel position. So again, the more the dog receives that positive reinforcement for doing the behavior, the more likely that behavior is going to happen more frequently in the future. So, over a few repetitions, several repetitions of doing this, what ends up happening is the dog starts to kind of just hang out on that left-hand side, on that heel side, right? Now, why does the dog just start to hang out on the left-hand side?
Because if we're consistently having that positive consequence come from that left side, the dog's going to be trying to help out the owner get that food faster and stay where that food is kind of coming from.
Yeah, the dog is intentionally going to that position in order to solicit a reward, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we start to talk about another fundamental concept where we talk to the client about what we call the learning stages. So the very first learning stage is the stage that every dog is in when they come in for the very first time, where they'd have maybe never done these behaviors before, didn't know anything about, if these behaviors are good or bad or indifferent. And they're in the first learning stage where they're doing this behavior for the first time and getting some type of feedback to let them know that this behavior is good or bad or what have you. So in the first learning stage, we're going to call this acquisition, which is the first time a dog shows us the behavior and gets some type of feedback for it or consequence, right? So if the consequence is good, like in this case, positive reinforcement, the dog is going to start to try to get that reinforcement again and try to show us that behavior again. So what is the second stage of learning?
I use different terms than you, I think, but fluency. I think you have a different set of words that you use, but I use fluency.
Yep, fluency. And the word I use is automation, meaning they kind of do it automatically.
Yeah.
Right? My dog automatically goes to my left-hand side in order to try to solicit a reward. It's like when you walk over to the cabinet where you normally keep your cookies, right, your treats for your dogs, but you're just reaching up there to grab something else, and your dog comes over and sits pretty, right? Yeah. Sits right next to you. He's doing that because he thinks he's going to get a reward, right? Our dog has realized that this behavior produces a reward. So they're in that second stage of learning. So far, the three kind of fundamental categories we've talked about are going to be the big three, where we've talked about that motivation. What is the dog working for? The dog is working for food in this instance. We started talking about positive reinforcement. That's going to be part of our operant conditioning conversation, which we're going to get into later. And now we're starting to talk about our canine learning stages, right? We've gone through the first and second learning stages of canine learning, where our dog didn't really know what they were doing. They just got, consequence for doing the behavior well. They got a good consequence. They started doing it enough that they decided they're going to do it intentionally in order to solicit a reward. And that's where they get into that second stage of learning.
You know what we haven't touched yet?
What?
Classical conditioning.
Yeah.
The white whale.
So technically we have talked about classical conditioning, but we haven't named it yet.
We haven't named the behavior.
So what Kelly is talking about with classical conditioning is when we have something that is generally neutral and we create some type of positive or negative association with it. So we have actually talked about something where it was neutral to begin with, but then we created a positive association with it. And Kelly, what was that?
The clicker.
The marker, yes. So the marker, before we ever did any training with the dog, my dog can hear a click and have zero response to it. It's just a click, right? My dog can hear the word good and there's no association with it. But when we do that conditioning, that marker conditioning, we teach our dog that sound means that food is coming. Our dog, when they hear that sound, get really excited because they think food is coming. And that way, that is what we call classical conditioning. So now my dog has a really positive association with the sound of a clicker or the word good. So technically we have been talking about classical conditioning, we just haven't named it yet. I mean, we really haven't named operant conditioning either because we're not far enough into the weeds with that yet for it to be meaningful, I think.
This is going to have to be there's no way we do this in one episode.
We're going to do it in one episode.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we're going to do it. Trust me. It goes much faster as we get into the later lessons, as I would say. My other German Shepherd is up.
Bro dog.
So, okay, so usually in lesson 1...
Water break.
Usually in lesson 1, I do like to cover marker conditioning, which I guess we do cover a little bit of classical conditioning. I can kind of talk about that as well. We also talk about positive reinforcement. We also talk about the first 2. We might get into the 3rd stage of learning. Alba.
Alba's being real grumpy.
That's okay. We might get into the 3rd stage of learning for the dog. So let's say the dog is super high speed and really loves the training, super food motivated. The client did a really good job doing their homework before their first lesson. And the dog is picking up the behavior really well, really is just hanging out in that left-hand heel position, right? So 30 minutes into the first lesson, the dog is glued to the owner's side. What do we do from there?
Are you talking about the generalization stage?
Yes, I am talking about the generalization stage.
Okay, cool. From there, we start saying, hey, this behavior is expected everywhere. In the house, outside of the house, in the car. Not in the car for heel, but kind of generalizing that behavior does not just happen in that one scenario, in that one spot. Why are you making faces?
Well, so this is one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of the words that you use.
Okay.
Because if this behavior is expected, how does the dog know that this behavior is expected in someplace new?
Well, it's not we've hit generalization phase, I'm going to start correcting my dog.
We haven't even named the behavior yet.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're distracting me. You're over here doing stuff with your hands and I'm half trying to think about what I'm talking about and I'm half is this a signal? Is this some kind of secret message I'm supposed to know I'm doing something wrong?
No, I just have manual fixation. I have to do stuff with my hands in order to stay focused on the task that I'm doing.
Okay, well, I can't focus on my tasks now. Anyway, between the fluency and generalization stage, you start naming the behavior so the dog knows the behavior. How can you be between
stages?
It's a weird thing. I don't know, because I think of it as between stages. I feel like some people say it's the end of the fluency stage or it's the beginning of the generalization stage. I say it's in between because, to me, it's in between to me, okay? Stop looking at me.
How do you know that you're in the 3rd stage?
Well, the dog's doing fluency really well, and we've named the behavior.
We've named the behavior.
Yeah.
Right? Past tense, meaning the dog knows the name of the behavior.
Yeah, so we're
in 3rd stage. Bingo.
Between.
No.
We're in between.
You're still in stage 2 when you're naming it.
I'm going to say that's the general probably accepted answer, but personally, I will not agree with that till the day I die. This is the most uninformative podcast ever.
These are the conversations we have, and this is the conversations a lot of dog trainers, I think, have too.
This is where most of my anxiety comes from.
I know. So let's check it out. So, okay, let's talk about the learning stages. So in the first learning stage, right, the dog is just learning that the behavior is rewarding, right? In the 2nd stage, the dog is doing it automatically. In the third stage, the dog knows that the behavior is this name, right? When I say heel, it means be next to me.
Yeah.
The stages are marked with these benchmarks that are determined by the dog, not by us.
Okay.
We do things to help the dog move through those stages.
Okay.
But when I'm naming, just because I start to use the name of the behavior doesn't mean I've put the dog into a different learning stage.
Well, that's why I feel like, now let's all petition. We have another category called the naming phase, because I think I take benchmark as definition. I feel like most people take benchmark as definition on these. Like,
What?
if you're thinking of the fluency stage,
Yeah.
the dog is becoming fluent in that behavior. They're automatically doing it, right?
And while they're automatically doing it, I just happen to be saying the word.
It doesn't fit into the acronym.
There is no acronym.
Yours is like all A's, isn't it?
Yeah. What, does yours spell a word?
I can't think of the letters, to
No,
be
it
honest.
doesn't. What is your first stage?
Acquisition, my brain's on fire.
Showing.
Yes. Acquisition.
How do I know your words better than you?
Mine's
know?
always been acquisition.
No.
Has it? Is it showing?
You have showing, fluency, generalization, and maintenance.
Showing, fluency, generalization, maintenance. That's what it's called. That's the word. Easy to remember, mnemonic device.
Okay. So we cannot put the dog into a learning stage, right?
Yeah.
We can only affect the dog, what stage the dog is in, and we can help the dog progress through them, but we don't do it, right? So when I look at my dog who's standing there and just staring at me like an NPC, right? Like Alba does. She just sits there and stares at me. And I look at her and I tell her the word heel, and she gets excited and flips into that heel position. I know that she knows the name of the behavior,
Yeah.
and I know she's at least in that third stage of learning, right? If my dog is just doing the behavior automatically, regardless if I say it or not, I don't know if my dog necessarily knows the word.
Yeah.
But I know that my dog is going to do it, and I just happen to say it before the dog does it,
Yeah.
right? My dog is still in that second phase of learning, and they haven't moved into that third stage until I know that the dog knows that the word means this behavior. That makes sense?
Like, I'm tracking what you're saying. Like, I hear you. I understand you. But in my head, there's like a little space between step 2 and 3, and that's where the name goes. That's its own little like thing. Like and I'm not saying I train that way. That's just how I process.
That's how you're processing.
And I think like anyone that's listening knows that I don't process normally.
I know. That's why we're working through this. Okay. So we're into the naming stage for our heel in lesson 1, and from there, we usually send the client home to go practice this much with the dog, right? And even if it's just, the dog is in the heel position, we say the word heel, we mark that the dog is in the heel position, and we reward, and you just do that repetitively, that's going to produce a very positive effect as far as your dog wanting to be at your side, as instead of being out in front of you, lunging at the end of the leash, sniffing the ground, all of these complaints that we have when people are saying, my dog is really bad on walks, right? We just want to create a lot of reward history with being next to you. So, not to sidetrack more, but one of the concepts I do like to talk about with my clients that I don't necessarily hear from a lot of other dog trainers is talking about how when we are talking about the name of the behavior, right? I want to tell my dog heel, and I want them to hop into that heel position, right? I want to tell my dog place, and I want my dog to run to their place bed. I want to tell my dog kennel, and I want them to run to their kennel. I want to tell my dog down and have them flop down into that down position. I like to really think about teaching my dog that the name heel is just telling my dog where to expect the reward. Mm-hmm. So if I say the word heel, my dog's expecting that food is going to be on my hip, right? If I say kennel, my dog is going to expect that the food is going to end up in the kennel. If I say place, my dog expects that the food's going to be on the place bed. And it really does kind of help, tell people how to reward the dog for these specific behaviors. And we're going to talk about that more as we get into the next behaviors as well. Before we do that, did I miss anything for our first lesson we go over?
I don't think so.
Okay. So let's move on. So from there, they usually send them home to go practice for a week. They come back in, and by the time they come in, the dog should love being on their left-hand side, right? Just loves hanging out there. We'll hang out there all day just to get food, and that's perfect. Because in lesson 2, this is where we start to talk about sit. So in lesson 2, At this point, the client should be really fluent with using their marker for the behavior that they like. The dog should love being on that left-hand side. And this is where we're going to start to ask the dog to sit on that left-hand side. So, up to this point, the reason why the dog is hanging out on that left-hand side is because they've been getting so much positive reinforcement for that behavior. Being on the left-hand side produces a reward. They like it. Awesome. So when we teach sit, we're going to use a combination of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So, Kelly, what is negative reinforcement?
So negative reinforcement is taking away an unwanted experience. My brain was thinking of unpleasurable. That's why I couldn't think. That's what was taking up the space in there.
Good.
But it's taking away that experience, and that itself is rewarding.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to steal your little example, seatbelts. You know, my car goes, brr, 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 brr. When my seatbelt's not on, I get tired of hearing it because this car that I have now does not turn off. It just gets worse. I met my match. And so I turned that bad experience off, and now I'm trained to get in the car and put my seatbelt on before I have to hear that god-awful noise.
Yep. Yeah. So you get in the car, you hear ding, 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 which means you need to put your seatbelt on. The moment you put that seatbelt on, that ding, 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 ding stops, right? There's no delay in it. It doesn't anticipate stopping because you're reaching for the seatbelt. It only turns off the moment you click the seatbelt in. So we use this exact same concept with teaching sit. So when we want the dog to sit, we use a little bit of a food lure, and we also use leash pressure. So what we would do is we pull upwards on the leash pressure until the dog goes into the seated position. The moment the dog is in that seated position, we mark saying that that is the behavior we want, and we release that leash pressure. And that is, something that the dog wants. Nobody likes having leash pressure on them. It's just kind of a nagging, annoying feeling, and they want it to go away.
Yeah.
So the moment they sit, that feeling goes away. We mark, and we give them a treat, right? Saying, hey, all of that is exactly what I want. This is perfect, okay? So we've talked about positive reinforcement, which is that treat, that cookie for doing the behavior we like. Now we're also talking about negative reinforcement. So we're talking about two different types of reinforcement, but they're both reinforcement. So what is the definition of reinforcement?
Something that increases a behavior.
Bingo.
A consequence that increases a behavior.
Bingo.
I'm like trying to cover all my bases.
You're doing fantastic. I know. It is a consequence, which means it comes after the behavior, and it increases the likelihood the behavior is going to happen again. Just like with that seatbelt, with negative reinforcement, now, before I even turn my car on, I put that seatbelt on, right? I don't even have to hear that ding, 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 ding for me to want to put that seatbelt on. And with our training programs, the reason why our behaviors are so reliable is because we are using the exact same concepts with our dogs. So we teach the dogs that, hey, you're going to feel this annoying sensation, this tugging on the leash until your butt hits the ground, but the moment your butt hits the ground, it's going to turn off. So in this aspect, we're putting the dog in complete control over when they're feeling it and when it stops. And the faster they learn that, the more confidently they're going to do that behavior. Meanwhile, they're also getting a cookie for every time they're doing it, which is awesome. So before the dog gets up out of that seated position, we're going to use what's called a release marker. So for most of our dogs, we're going to use the word free. Let's go back and talk a little bit more about our markers. So I know we talked about either our clicker or our verbal marker to let the dog know that, they've done something good and they're going to get a reward. We call this a reward marker. But when we ask our dog to do something like sit, we want our dog to do that until we tell them otherwise. I can tell my dog good and give them a treat, but they still have to stay seated, right? So we're going to call this a continuation marker, which means my dog has to continue to do the behavior even though I've marked, and I'm going to give them a reward. So if my dog's sitting and I say good, I can give them a treat, and then I'm going to tell them free, which is their release marker, which allows them to get up. It's important for our dog to understand the difference between these because I want to be able to reward my dog in a behavior without necessarily allowing them to stop doing that behavior first. right? We will talk about another type of marker a little bit later where we're going to allow the dog to get up out of that behavior to get their reward, but we're going to start by just keeping it on the continuation marker, which is good, and our release marker, which for our release marker free, there's no reward. So we're going to call that a no reward release marker. The terms aren't that important, but understanding what is expected of the dog when they hear these different words is very important. So every single time I tell my dog to sit, they should stay seated until I release them. Now, obviously, in the first lesson that we're doing this, the first time I'm doing this with the dog, I'm going to have the dog, go into that seated position. They're going to get that marker. They're going to, release the leash pressure. They're going to get their cookie, and I'm immediately going to release them with the word free. I'm not going to ask them to stay there just yet. It is so important to create this consistency from the very first time you do it, and this is what's going to create a dog that's going to stay seated until you tell them otherwise. I love telling the story about when I had Dakota at my other training facility, and I was cleaning up at the end of the day, and she's on her place bed, and I'm loading all my stuff into the car, and I'm loading up the dogs, and I lock up the doors, and I drive away, and I realize I forgot something. Oh my God, Dakota. I go back, and she's still sitting there right on her place bed, because that was the last thing I told her to do.
Poor Dakota.
I know. She always gets forgotten. She's just so good.
She does get forgotten.
But that's how you get there, is through consistency. So consistency is another one of our...
Oh, the big three.
Yes.
Sorry, I was looking at your watch and I was like, what psychopath has it on an analog watch?
I like to challenge my brain, okay? When someone asks me, hey, what time it is, I just look at it and panic and go, the arms are like this. Okay, so another one of the big three is consistency. What was the first of the big three that we talked about?
Motivation.
Okay, what was the next one?
Timing.
And what was the last one?
Consistency.
We have all three of our big three. So this is the first fundamental concept that we want to understand. So the big three are the big three factors that are needed in order for a dog to learn. All right? So we need to make sure that our dog is working for something. This is how we're going to create a dog who wants to do the behaviors. We have to make sure that we are timing our reinforcement correctly, our markers, our... Stop looking at my watch.
I'm sorry, why do you have it like that? It's not normal.
Our marker is accurately timed. Our feedback to the dog is accurately timed so that our dog can make the association between their behavior and the consequence that follows. So, do you know how long of a window we have between the dog's behavior and the consequence for them to actually make that association?
Are you talking about like with the marker included?
Well, the dog does behavior, and then, if we mark, that is a consequence of the behavior, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Isn't it like half a second or something crazy?
It's 1.2 seconds.
1.2 seconds.
People say it's between 1 and 2 seconds. People say it's like between 2 and 3 seconds.
I don't think about that. I just do.
Yeah. The closer you can get, the better. There are some dogs who will make that association over the course of like minutes, but the closer you can get to the actual time of the behavior, the better. So the better your timing is, the faster the dog is going to learn. But overall, like I said, there are dogs who will figure it out even if the consequence comes minutes after the behavior, right? And the reason is because that consequence is so consistent, right? Every single time that garage door opens, the next thing that happens is I come walking into the house, right? It doesn't matter if I have to sit out in my car, unload groceries or whatever within, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. After that garage door opens, the next thing that happens is I walk in, and my dogs are probably all standing up and excited to see me because they know every single time consistently that garage door opens, mom walks in the house, right? So even if your timing is off, even if your dog is not super motivated, if you're consistent enough, your dog will still learn. But if you use all three, motivation, timing, and consistency, your dog's going to learn things so much faster.
One of our current training dogs is like plastered in my brain right now, lacking the motivation.
Yes. But she's getting there.
She's trying her best. And you know why? I got 2 out of the 3.
That's right. Exactly. So, It just takes time. Don't worry.
Timing. Ha ha ha.
Oh my gosh. All right. Hi, bro.
And Alba.
The 2 German Shepherds have come to join us for our podcast.
They have thoughts. Maybe
Sometimes.
not bro, but Alba might have a thought in there.
No. All right. So when we're working on our lesson 2, which is going to be our sit lesson, we go over our negative reinforcement during this lesson. We talk about, again, we go through our learning stages, right? So the first time we're having the dog do the sit, it's the first time the dog's ever done it where they felt that leash pressure, they put their butt in the ground, that leash pressure goes away, right? Which is the first stage of learning, which is acquisition or showing. The dog starts to realize that, hey, every time mom stops, she puts on that leash pressure until I sit. What ends up happening?
The dog starts to sit before that leash pressure.
Exactly. So the dog starts to anticipate it and does it automatically, which tells us to go into that second stage of learning. So we can start to use that word because as soon as you say the word sit, right before the dog is going to sit, and we know they're going to sit, right? Then the dog will start to make that association. So again, like I said, these concepts continue to follow us through the training program, and we're going to apply them to every skill that we teach with the dog. So we apply the same concepts to, the sit command where we say the word sit. If the dog doesn't sit automatically, what do?
We add that leash pressure to kind of help them out.
Exactly. That consistency with that is super important. Every time we say that sit command, if the dog doesn't sit on their own, we're going to make them sit using that leash pressure. All right. So that's essentially what we cover in lesson 2. Lesson 2 is pretty limited to that. Most people really struggle with teaching the sit using the leash pressure. It is very kind of hand intensive, but as long as they get it by the end of that lesson and go home and practice it, everything goes awesome. So the reason why we teach things this way too is because now when the client goes home that week after the second lesson, now they have 2 things to practice. They have heel and they have sit. I always try to make sure I tell them that when you're practicing at home, you're either going to practice your heel or you're going to practice your sit. Don't practice them together just yet. When the dogs are learning new behaviors, they're still figuring them out, they're still learning. If you try to combine them, you're just going to confuse them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the owners at that stage are going to get confused too.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. All right. So ideally, the client goes home, they practice a bunch of heel sessions, they practice a bunch of sit sessions. I usually recommend, think about on a day-to-day basis which one's going better, which one's going worse. Whichever one's going worse, try to dedicate a few more sessions to that one that day, and vice versa. And ideally, within the next week, the client comes in and their heel is looking beautiful. Their sit is starting to turn into what we call an auto sit, where the dog is anticipating going to that sit anytime the owner stops. So at this stage, we like to teach the place command. For anyone who doesn't know what the place command is, we call this a boundary stay. So the boundary stay is the very general term for teaching your dog to go up onto something that has very clear boundaries, like a place bed, an elevated pet cot, and teaching them to stay there. So again, we're teaching the elevated place bed, and we're trying to teach the dog to go up there. We're going to start with using that positive reinforcement, just like we did with heel. Encouraging the dog to go up there. As soon as they go up there with all 4 paws, marking it, rewarding it, everything stays exactly the same, and we're going to create clear definitions for what the behavior is. Now, this one's really easy to do. When all 4 paws are on the bed, you mark reward. We can create really simple guidelines for what we expect from the dog and the behavior. All right. So we go through this process. We like to make sure that we're continuing to reinforce doing this behavior in the heel position, just like we did with sit. Sit was in the heel position. Now we're doing place in the heel position. When I say we're doing it in the heel position, the dog will be on the place bed, and the place bed will be on our left-hand side where we would have our dog in heel. So Kelly, you do actually a really good job of describing how we want the dog going on and off the bed using the analogy with the crate.
Yeah. So I kind of explained to the clients to think of that bed as one of the kennels with like the door in the front, and then there's no other way off that bed. That way, you know, when we start adding in our next training concept, like the next cluster, I guess, the dog's not gonna start going off the bed, hopefully, you know, all different ways and just winging off. Oh, sometimes I go off the back, sometimes I come on through the side. Everything's crazy. It's always just on and off through the door, the hypothetical door.
So the place bed looks like a crate, right? It's a rectangle, just like a crate is.
Yeah.
The crate has 3 walls, and the 4th wall has the door.
Yeah.
Which means the dog can only go in and out through the door. So we treat the place bed basically the same way. You know, for a lot of good reasons. One, it helps prevent the dog from, you know, just kind of wandering off the bed. There's only one way on and off. It does also lend itself to preparing our dog for more advanced behaviors later. Things like send to place and things like that. But it also, I think, gives the client a really good frame of reference for like how we want to be next to the bed, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, I want the dog next to me. So let's say, you know, if we're imagining the crate, right? And the door of the crate is facing forward, and we're standing next to the dog and we're facing forward also. So us and the crate door are both facing forward. The dog is facing forward, like they're going to face out the door. So that way when we walk forward and we want the dog to come with us, the dog is coming off in that heel position ideally, right? So before we start naming it or anything like that, again, we just want our dog enjoying the bed. So they get up on the bed, we mark, we reward, we stand in that heel position, and before we have them come off, we're going to use that release marker, i.e. we're going to say free, we're going to walk forward, and the dog's going to come off with us, okay? Now, there are some techniques I like to use here. Like I always walk off with my left foot. If we're going to start to ask our dog to stay, which we're going to get into in a little bit, we don't actually use the stay command, but we're going to talk about how we do that in a minute. But if I want my dog to stay in the place bed, I'm going to walk off with my right foot to give my dog a little extra cue. But this is where we usually start to get into what we call our stay. Now, we never actually use the word stay, but it's the best way to refer to having our dog remain in a behavior, i.e. a sit, a down, in this case on the place bed. You can teach your dog a stand stay. If you want to get fancy with it, you can teach your dog to stay in any behavior you like. But for this specific example, we're going to be doing the place bed. So when we want our dog to remain in a stay behavior, there are 3 things that we're going to want to increase to create more reliable and more advanced levels of that stay. And what are those 3 things?
So they're called the 3Ds. Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's going to be distance, how far can I get from the dog, duration, how long can the dog stay in that command position, whatever we're doing, and distraction, what can go on around the dog and the dog's still successful.
Nice. So which one do we normally start with?
Duration.
Nice. And why is that?
Because one, you can't have the others and not have that one, and it's also like the most simple concept to introduce.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's say I wanted to try and walk away from my dog, but my dog can't stay up there long enough for me to actually walk away. It's really hard to do that. So we want our dog to learn duration first. We do this by just simply rewarding over longer and longer durations, continue to reward repetitively while my dog is up there. And then we start to add, after my dog is able to do that, we start to add that distance very gradually as well. So my dog is already hanging out there for a long time. Now we just add a little bit of movement away from the bed. And we start to increase the 3Ds little by little. We like to do this in a very specific way just to make sure that the dog understands what we're asking for. The place bed is the best place to start doing a stay. A lot of people ask me, why don't we just start doing this with the sit, since our dog already knew the sit from the last lesson? But you'll find that the place bed is the most stable of all of the stay behaviors, and the sit is the second to least stable, meaning the least stable would be a stand stay. Or if your dog can do handstands, a handstand stay.
Where have you seen that?
Maddie can do a handstand on the wall.
Oh, on the wall.
He'll stay there all day, though.
I thought you meant the dog just goes, like, in the middle of the room, booty up.
My friend's dog does handstands.
I'd like to see this.
Okay, I'll show you after this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. She actually does handstands through weave poles.
What?
Yeah.
Gracie could never.
Yeah, she could.
Gracie runs into a wall.
It's amazing. If you guys haven't checked out TikTok dog trainer Positive Impact, PAW Positive Impact, you should definitely check her out. I went to dog training school with her. She's amazing. Amazing trainer. Her dogs are fantastic. She does a lot of like live training sessions. Just amazing dogs. So yeah, shout out to Alyssa. She's amazing. Anyways. Okay, so we talked about the 3Ds. So normally, before I start to get into the 3Ds with my client, we talk about one of the other quadrants of our operant conditioning. So we talked about 2 quadrants already. So the first 2 quadrants we talked about were positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So now we're going to start to see our dogs make mistakes. Up to this point, we really haven't allowed the dog to make mistakes yet. So in the first lesson when we did heel, all we were doing was ignoring any behavior that we didn't like and only rewarding the behavior we did like. For the second lesson of sit, we basically just waited out until the dog did the behavior. We rewarded them the moment they did it and gave them a release to get up out of that behavior immediately. So there was no opportunity for them to get up too soon, for them to do the behavior inappropriately or anything like that. Once we start to add the 3Ds, we can expect the dog is going to start to make the mistakes. So let's say my dog's up on the place bed. I've told them the place command. They are figuring out the word place means to be on the bed. And I start to ask my dog to remain up there for a little bit longer. And my dog makes a mistake by just stepping off. Right? Because we've gone up on the bed, we've stepped off, we got up on the bed, we stepped off repetitively. Maybe my dog thinks that that's what he's supposed to do. We need to be able to give our dog feedback, let our dog know that that was a mistake and that's not something that's allowed after I've told you to go onto the bed, right? Like I said, if I tell you a command, sit or heel or place, you do that until I tell you otherwise. So if I tell you place, you go on the bed and you stay there until I tell you to do something else or until I tell you free. So, if our dog makes a mistake, i.e. they have stopped doing the behavior before I've told them they could stop doing the behavior, we're going to use what's called positive punishment. So, in this instance, how do we do positive punishment?
Well, are you asking me like what consequence do we create or what the definition is?
You can do both.
Okay. Well, the definition is adding an unpleasurable...
Hate that word.
We're gonna name the episode "Pleasures and Unpleasures of Dog Training."
Pleasures and unpleasurables.
Anyway, I'm adding an unpleasant. I don't even like the word pleasant, but adding an unpleasant consequence to that behavior. And in this case,
the behavior.
Having the behavior result in an unpleasant consequence.
That was beautiful. Very nice. Very nicely worded.
This is going to be in the court case for my workplace harassment.
Oh, I thought you were going to say for your murder charge.
No, I could not. I could not.
No, because you'd be stuck with 7 dogs.
I know.
Dogs. Yeah.
I could make it work. Dante will love me eventually.
Dante will love you eventually. I hope Dante's grandma listens to this. I bet she misses him.
Anyway, we're adding that unwanted sensation post behavior. I worded that one fun, but we understand at this point.
Do we?
Y'all get it. You're cool. Y'all get it. I should just start doing my lessons like that. Yep. So you're gonna make the dog sit. Y'all cool. You get it. $100. Thanks. Yeah. I will not do that. Anyway, in this case, we're gonna be using leash corrections, probably on a slip lead, leash pops.
Yep.
Which we do have to talk about how to do with the clients.
Yes. So, don't just go home and start like leash popping your dog unless you've actually been taught how to do it by a professional, because there is a right way and a wrong way. But this is where we start to introduce the leash pop. It's just kind of annoying to the dog. It's nothing too like crazy. We're usually doing this on a standard rope slip leash. We're not, first time the dog's ever getting a leash pop, it's not on a prong collar necessarily. I don't think I've ever had the dog's first correction ever be on a prong collar or an e-collar.
It's not dog daddy in here.
No. So we do it on a slip leash. And so the dog steps off. They get a sudden tug on that leash. They go, hey, that was kind of annoying. I didn't like that. we want them to understand that behavior is what produced that consequence. Just like we want our dog to understand that when they go into the heel position, that's the reason they got a treat. They need to understand that the reason that they got that leash pop was for stepping off the bed. So, just like we have a marker to let our dog know that they did the right thing, we also have a marker to let our dog know that they've done the wrong thing. So we're going to call this our punishment marker. We're usually going to use the word no. You can use other words, like some people go or some people use like other languages like nine and fooey and all sorts of crazy stuff. The word doesn't really matter, just as long as you're using it consistently. So, if we told our dog the word place and they step off the place bed before we've released them, we're going to use the word no or whatever our negative marker is, and that's going to be followed by our actual consequence, which would be our leash pop, or we can use other methods later. For right now, we're just going to worry about the leash pop. So, my dog steps off the bed, I say the word no, they get that leash pop. The important thing here, just like with the importance of the positive marker, is that leash pop has to come after the word no, right? Otherwise, the dog, you're not going to get the desired effect from this training process. The word no is also super important because eventually, as you progress through adding that distance, adding those distractions, maybe you're further away, maybe you're out of sight, and your dog makes a mistake, it might take you 10, 15 seconds to walk over to your dog to provide them that feedback that they've made a mistake. And by the time you get over there, the dog is going to struggle to make the connection with their behavior and that consequence. So the dog has a 1 to 2 second window where they can actually make that association. So having that negative marker to let them know that that punishment is coming is super important. Okay? So when we talk about the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning, we've talked about positive reinforcement. The dog gets something that they like to increase the likelihood that behavior will happen in the future. We talked about negative reinforcement, where we're going to take away something our dog doesn't like to increase the likelihood of behavior will happen in the future. When we use positive punishment, what is the definition of positive punishment?
Adding an unpleasant behavior. Oh my God, you're ruining me. Adding an unpleasant consequence to the behavior, post behavior, after the behavior. After you do the behavior and the dog does it wrong, you add something the dog doesn't like. Is that clear?
That was so good. I'm so glad we got that. Oh my God, yes. Oh, that's so great. Okay, so when we talk about punishment is going to be anything that's going to discourage our dog from doing this behavior in the future. Does it mean that our dog will never do this again? No, but it's less likely that our dog will do it in the future if this consequence is there for that action. All right, so when we talk about quadrants, obviously there's going to be 4 of them for quad. What is the 4th quadrant?
It's going to be negative punishment.
What's negative punishment?
So that's taking away something the dog likes as a result of the behavior that the dog gives. After the behavior, if the dog does it wrong, we take away the positive reward, the good thing that we add after the behavior, unless the dog does it wrong. I'm making it confusing now.
You are making it
too clear.
You could have just stopped talking. It was perfect, and then you just kept going, and you ruined it.
Because you look at me, and then I'm like, oh my God, it's wrong.
I'm sorry.
You've classically conditioned me the wrong way, incorrectly. But I feel like that one's confusing unless you do like add an example. Like the dog is, I don't know, barking and rolling around in the kennel because it wants you to open the kennel door. So every time I get, if I take a step closer, the dog adds the behavior I don't like, rolling around in the kennel. I move myself away from opening that door, taking away the possibility of coming out, which is what the dog wants.
Well, I actually find that a really good example for our negative punishment is dogs who like to rush out the door. So The way I like to teach our dogs not to rush out the door is I have them on leash in the heel position, standing at the door, and I start to open the door. And as I open that door, if the dog gets up out of that seated heel position, I close the door. I'm taking away my dog's access to the outside. My dog wants to go outside, but because they broke that sit, they lose the access to the outside.
Yeah.
trying to think of another good example.
Or if you're feeling, this isn't for like all the client dogs, 'cause I feel like some people are okay with it. But if you have a dog that goes from that sit and then just will automatically slide into that down, then you can kind of do that negative punishment. You know, the dog's trying to get that reward by going into the down. They think that's the right behavior, but we want the sit, so we just lose that opportunity to get the food.
Yeah.
That's a twisty way to explain that.
So that one's a little bit problematic, though, because there are definitely dogs who think that, hey, down has gotten me rewards before, maybe it'll get me rewards now. But then there are other dogs who are just, like, lazy.
Yeah, it's a case by case.
Yeah.
I feel like it also depends on, like when I have a dog, I know if the dog's going on a standard 3-week training schedule, we haven't had any hiccups or any like additional things to work on. I know when that dog comes back for week 3, I'm gonna have to kind of like revisit that sit because they're gonna want to do the down from week 2. If that makes sense. Yeah. So then like at that point, then I'm thinking like less on the lazy side if I know the dog, more on the...
Yeah, and I mean, like, when we do our lessons, every single time the client comes in, I always ask them how the homework went. I always have them show me the homework, because even if they say, oh, it went perfect, no issues, it's wonderful, everything's great. Great, show me. And they go, well, yeah. But yeah, so whenever we're thinking about, you know, negative punishment, a really good example is... my dog is out here and decides he wants to bark at the squirrels running outside. And I send him to his kennel. I am removing my dog's freedom. My dog has lost the access to freedom. My dog gets to go sit in his kennel and think about what he did. Yeah. Right? When I was a kid, if my sibling and I were playing video games, we started to fight over the video games, my mom took away those video games and probably sent us to our rooms.
Silent treatment. If anyone's ever done that as hopefully a child, hopefully you're not still doing silent treatment, guys. Yeah. But
there you go, silent treatment. So you take away something that, you know, they want. You know, this is something I use a lot with my high drive dogs, because when we talk about high drive dogs, these are dogs who are actively working to get what they want. Yeah. Right? For instance, my dog Medic, i.e. Tinky, who we talk about all the time. Let's say I'm out in my field and I'm training and I have a hurdle and I have a tunnel and they're kind of out in front of me on the field. And I point my dog and I say tunnel and he goes and jumps over the hurdle. And I tell him no, or I can give him my no reward marker saying, nope, that wasn't the right answer. He jumped over that hurdle because he wanted his toy. Yeah. That's the reason. He did that for the reward. But I'm telling him he's not getting that reward because he didn't do the right thing. He did the wrong thing. He still did the wrong thing because he wanted something. And this is where negative punishment gets tricky because most people don't understand how it works. There's a lot of people I find in like what we'd call maybe the force-free or the positive-only world who believe that they're using negative punishment, but they're really not. Seeing someone with a dog barking at the end of the leash because the dog is reactive and the owner is just over there giving them like a negative marker like no or that's wrong, whatever. I ask them like, hey, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm using negative punishment or I'm giving my dog a no reward marker. I'm like, your dog's not trying to get a reward. Yeah. Your dog is just barking at the other dog because that's what they want to do. Yeah. Your dog doesn't care that you're withholding the treats from them in this moment. Their behavior is not to get that reward. So understanding that when you're using negative punishment, we are withholding or taking away something our dog is actively trying to get. And so that is something to keep in mind when you're thinking about the differences between the 4 quadrants, how you're using them. Trust me, it takes a long time to really kind of wrap your head around it and have it be a very fluent part of your training system. A lot of people are using them and they don't even know it. So understanding them will help you use them more effectively and be able to describe what you're doing to others too. It's really important, especially as you're trying to teach other people what it is that you're doing, to have common vocabulary to be able to describe, hey, I'm doing this because of this. Yeah. Right? It gives the why, it gives you credibility, and it gives just that common vocabulary to describe what you're doing in a way that's understood by other people. I'm not going to lie, I had a training weekend with somebody, a big name, a really well-known working dog trainer who's been in the field for dozens of years, decades, And so they came, they were teaching us, some different techniques and methods and this, that, and the other. And at one point I had asked, oh, you want me to mark at this point, or when my dog does this, you want me to mark, should I be using my continuation marker or my termination marker? And the person had no idea what I was talking about. And because he didn't understand the differences between those, I still didn't understand what type of marker I was supposed to be using. Was I supposed to be releasing my dog out of behavior at that moment? We couldn't have the conversation to help me better understand the reasons why his methods were so successful.
Yeah.
His methods were successful for him. That's great. But in order for me to be able to replicate them and get successful results as well, I have to understand why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And that's why it's so important for us to understand these concepts, to be able to, give those understandings or those concepts to our clients as well. Sorry, I got on a tangent.
No, you're okay.
So I know we talked a little bit about the operant conditioning. We could spend an entire podcast just talking about operant conditioning, but we really just wanted to give you the tip of the iceberg with that one at least.
Clickbait.
Yeah. So when we talk about our next episode, operant conditioning,
we always say the next episode's going to be about this,
and
then it never is.
No. Yeah, it'll be a future episode. It'll be about it.
There'll be a future episode.
Yeah.
Maybe not about that, but there'll be another episode.
It'll be about dogs, maybe.
Maybe we'll switch to cats.
No, please no.
I want to know about cat training. I don't want to train a cat, but I just want to know, it has to have some form of pack drive, right? Because cats live in clans.
I thought it was a clouder.
What? That's not what a group of cats is called.
I thought it was.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, hey listeners, if you know what a group of cat is called, email us.
Help.
Okay, so we start using positive punishment on our place lesson, and usually at this point, right, the clients have, we spend enough time going over the 3Ds where the dog is staying on the place bed as we ask them to stay up there longer, as we start to move away, and we're able to add in some distractions, right? So at this point, the client goes home that week to practice not only place, but to continue practicing heel, to continue practicing sit. And the reason why we have this order of things, everyone's like, well, heel is so hard to teach. Heel is the hardest thing to teach. It takes the longest for the dog to learn. So this way, the dog is able to have the most amount of time to work on it, right? Because whether you teach it first or you teach it last, it's still going to take the longest to learn for the dog. So the client goes home, continues to work on heel. The dog is going to sit in the heel position, which is going to also help reinforce that heel position as well. We do our place in the heel position, which again is going to continue to reinforce that heel position. Now, as the dog is staying up in that place bed for longer durations, as the person's practicing over the weekend, over the week, stays up there while we walk away, we come back, and just stays up there for longer and longer, eventually the dog's usually going to lay down, and you can reinforce that, right? Hey, you lay down, you get a treat. Awesome. So usually by lesson 4, client comes in, everything's gone perfect in training, they do all the homework, everything's beautiful. By the way, it never goes that way, just so you know. Every once in a while, you'll get a client who's doing a really good job, but then, maybe they have a busy week, or they just forgot, or they were on vacation, whatever. So in a perfect world, this is usually how it would go. So 4th lesson, we go over down, and ideally, if the dog has been laying down in the place bed enough, the down should come pretty easily in lesson 4. So in lesson 4, this is where I like to kind of begin to test the client's knowledge on all the concepts we talked about up to this point. So we used a little bit of leash pressure to help our dog into that down position, just like we did with sit. We combine it with a little bit of luring, meanwhile making sure the client understands, hey, when we're using this leash pressure, what is this called?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's way past my bedtime. I'm zoning out.
Yeah. So we use the leash pressure to help the dog into the down position.
Yeah. So that's going to be it's going to result in the negative a good thing, negative good thing. What is the word I'm thinking of? Reinforcement. The dog's gonna feel the leash pressure, want to turn it off, and the dog goes in the down, we turn it off.
So we have an opening for an apprenticeship position. If anybody,
no, you took me to Applebee's and I had 2 shark bowls.
You didn't eat. You had like 2 sips of the second one.
I ate all the sharks.
You did.
I had my sugar rush and now I'm crashing.
I know. Okay. So yes. So at this point, we're starting to really just combine all of the concepts, right? We're talking about our learning stages as the dog does the behavior for the first time, as the dog starts to anticipate the behavior. And what's going to end up happening at this point too, because when we're walking with our dog and we stop, we want the dog to sit. At this point, the dog is probably going to auto sit. Once we start to do the down enough, the dog is going to start to auto down, which is okay. It tells me the dog is thinking. My dog is taking initiative. My dog is trying to do the right thing for us, right? And that's not something I want to punish at this point. Now, depending on what the goals are for the client, if they're going for like competitive level obedience, if they're going for, if they want something specific, or if they're just looking for a dog who's well-mannered and under control, I usually don't mind if the dog goes into a down when they're supposed to be sitting. What I don't really want to have happen is the dog go into a sit from the down necessarily. But if the dog decides to lay down because I've asked him to sit for too long, not usually that big of a deal for your average pet dog.
Yeah.
So we're always thinking about, how does this affect our day-to-day use of these skills at home? All right. So the last lesson that we go over is going to be our recall session. The reason why I saved this one for last, up to this point, we have heel, we have sit, we have place, we have down, we have so much other stuff that we've been practicing. We can use our last lesson to go over all of those skills, and recall takes all of about 5 minutes to teach.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that I teach recall, we like to use what's called a jackpot. So when the dog is doing recall, I want it extremely rewarding, more rewarding than all of the other behaviors. So I might either have, some special treats. I might have something else really highly valuable. But this is where we're going to use what's called a termination marker. So Kelly, talk a little bit about how we teach recall.
So the recall is I consider it like a red string conspiracy theory moment, because the client comes in and I'm like, oh, we're going to teach recall today. And I think they think recall and they're like, oh my God, this is going to be hard. My dog doesn't listen to me when I call his name. And then I'm like, you remember the attention game? And they're like, yeah, I remember the attention game. And I'm like, we're doing that.
Yes.
And they're like, shit.
I love it.
But that's basically how we start the recall. And
yeah.
I have had that conversation with more people, not even as clients, but more people than I would ever hope to have, because everyone starts recall 20 feet away.
Yep.
And I'm like, 5 inches, all you need.
Yeah.
5 inches, it's pretty big.
Someone's been lying to you. All right. So let's keep this PG-13. All right.
Too late.
So the attention game is where we just try to be really interesting to encourage our dog to come towards us. The moment our dog comes towards us, we mark, we reward, we make it a really big deal at this point, right? Because we're going to be giving them that really high value reward. So we've done the attention game before. The dog comes towards us, we give them a little piece of kibble, great. Today's different. I did an attention game, my dog comes towards me, and all of a sudden they get a big old piece of chicken.
Yeah.
And you see their eyes turn all bug-eyed, they look at you like you're Santa Claus, they go, what the hell was that?
You said right? Bug-eyed, I thought of Bruno.
No,
he's already bug-eyed.
I know, he can't get much more bug-eyed. But his recall is amazing, though.
Is that why? He's just permanently stuck in recall?
Everything is wonderful for Bruno. So we do this, and we just slowly increase the distance. When I'm teaching this for the first time, I will do a little bit, work on something else, especially during the lesson that we're teaching it, because I don't want to do recall after recall after recall after recall, because, one, the dog's not going to go away at this point. And I recall the dog maybe 3-4 times, and then we call it, and then we go on to something else. And by the end of the lesson, we can get the dog coming to us from upwards, to 10 to 15 feet away.
Yeah.
Now, we don't want to call the dog from a sit stay, a down stay, or a play stay. We want to call our dog from a free. Why do we want to call our dog from a free?
Because as with all training, one thing is going to kind of affect the other. So if I'm constantly recalling my dog from that play stay or the down stay, whatever stay we're using, my dog's going to start realizing that when I'm 15 feet away, breaking that behavior is now an option and it gets rewarded. And that's no bueno.
Yeah, exactly. And in a real life situation, if my dog is in a sit, if my dog is in a down, if my dog is on a place bed, my dog is under control. I don't need them to get up and do anything else because they are safe right where they are. The day that I need my dog to come to me is the day that my dog is free, off leash, about to run across a busy highway, and I need them to come to me. If I've only ever practiced with them under control, then it's going to be very hard for my dog to be able to perform this behavior in this environment, this situation where there is no control, there's no preset, this is a training situation. I want my dog thinking, oh, I'm just out here on a potty break. I'm just out here chasing butterflies. I'm just out here doing whatever I want to do. And I want my dog to be thinking that if they hear me call them, it's time to snap into action and come running to me as fast as they can because I got a pocket full of chicken waiting for them. And this is what we would call a jackpot. So the jackpot is just a significantly larger, higher value reward that our dog really, really likes. And we want to kind of put those in intermittently throughout our rewards. You can do this for other behaviors like place and sit and down, but you want to do them sparingly. You want to do them at critical moments, when the behavior is performed very perfectly, exactly the way you want it, with a higher level of intensity than before. That's when you really want to have that jackpot ready to go. All right.
I think we need to talk about termination marker.
Oh yeah.
And also, I guess do we really care about backing up in the heel? Is that something you want to talk about?
No.
I mean, not the heel. No. I mean the recall. My brain's dying.
Oh yeah, no. I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
We could talk about things like opposition reflex. We could talk about, prey drive and stuff like that, but
there's so many things.
I know. Really, I just wanted to talk about all the concepts that I expect my clients to learn in the first 5 lessons.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the big 3, our learning stages, the 3 Ds, operant conditioning, classical conditioning, marker training.
Marker training.
Yeah. Okay, so we just wanted to cover the basic fundamental canine learning theory concepts that I think are helpful, beneficial, and useful for all of the behaviors that you're going to teach throughout your dog's life. We use the 5 basic obedience behaviors, heel, sit, down, place, and recall, as examples of behaviors that you can teach using these concepts to help you become more fluent in them. But you're going to use these concepts if you teach your dog anything, whether it's to do handstands through weave pulls, do backflips, to do scent detection, to do tracking, to do protection training. These concepts are pervasive through all of these. We constantly are using negative punishment in protection training. We're constantly using positive reinforcement. We use all these concepts all the time in everything we teach the dog. And so if you can take a little time to really kind of get familiar with these, it's going to pay off in the long run.
And watch some dog training videos and try to identify what quadrant they're using when. That's really fun to watch for me.
It is. Except for Dog Daddy. Don't watch him.
Maybe let's not watch Dog Daddy.
Yeah.
Don't give him more views.
He doesn't know what the quadrants are. It's fine.
There are no quadrants. There's just prong collars and swinging.
Yeah, it was bad.
It's still bad.
It really is. Cool.
You didn't talk about termination markers.
Oh, we didn't talk about termination markers.
That's why I was poking your clicker.
My termination markers. So when we have the 2 positive markers, we have 2 different types of positive markers. We have continuation marker, we have termination marker. I think I'd mentioned those previously. So up to this point, when my dog has been in a sit and I say the word good, I'm going to give him a treat, but he should stay seated. That's our continuation marker. Our termination marker means that when I give my dog that marker, they can get up out of that behavior and come get their reward. This is something I like to use with my recall. So when I'm doing recall, and the intent is that my dog can come get their reward. So ideally, my dog is already coming to me. So if I use that termination marker, my dog is just going to start coming to me faster to get his reward faster. You can use the termination marker for any of the behaviors, but I don't generally recommend it for things like your sit or your down or your place. I just don't recommend using them too frequently. If you occasionally use them to create a little bit more excitement in the behaviors, you totally can. You can definitely do that in your healing as well. But most often, I like to use it with my recall, especially in the beginning of teaching that recall.
There's definitely like a technique to adding that termination marker to those other commands, like the heal and the sit and stuff too. Yep. There's like a certain way to introduce that.
Yeah, for sure. It can definitely be super helpful. Now, obviously, when you want your dog to come to you, just like with every other behavior, I want my dog to come and stay with me. I don't want to just say, Fido, come, have my dog do a flyby, get his treat, and then take off again. So once my dog, that's why I like to use that termination marker in the beginning, because my dog has already been released. You know, I've already told my dog that they can stop staying with me if they really want to. They can go F off wherever they want. So after my dog really has a good recall, and that's really strong, what I like to do at that point is teach my dog what I call a follow-on behavior. So I can either have my dog sit or heel, something to tell my dog to stay with me after they've come to me. But that usually gets more into our more advanced training. At first, I just want my dog to come to me. So in a situation where my dog is about to run across a busy highway, I say, Fido, come. He comes to me, and that way I can put his leash on, gain control of my dog, and carry on from there. So I don't know did we miss any concepts?
I don't know. My brain is kind of toast.
I know. Sorry.
My brain's real smooth. No winkles.
No wrinkles. Well, you know, every time you learn something, you get a new wrinkle, right?
Yeah, I try to keep mine with no winkles. Your brain, ugly. Wrinkles. My brain's wrinkly. Beautiful. Smooth. No winkles.
You try so hard. So, okay. All right. So I think that's the important stuff that I wanted to cover for tonight. We're going to go do deep dives into these concepts into future episodes. I know one of our next future episodes is going to be talking about markers, all the different types of markers, how you can get way overcomplicated with the markers, how you can keep it simple, and how I've seen different trainers use different markers to do different things. And some trainers have blown me away with how consistent they are with their markers and so on and so forth. And how some are just wildly inconsistent, yet the dog still gets it, and it's amazing. So, that's going to be our future episode.
Meaning it'll happen next year.
It might happen next episode. It might be the episode after that. Who knows?
I feel like we'll have to have like at least half an episode to gush about that seminar.
Oh yeah.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to talk about scent detection too.
How bad Gracie does. How
Gracie's
going
to do awesome.
Does.
Tinky's going to be amazing. I'm excited for Tinky.
I know Medic's going to be amazing. Because he always has to do a little bit better than Gracie.
Just a little bit?
Just at least a little bit.
Okay.
Because everyone's like, oh, look at the pointy-eared dog. And then they're like, oh, and then there's that one. She's all floppy and gross. There's drool coming out of her mouth.
Everyone loves Gracie. All right. Well, we'll do a whole episode on Gracie one of these days.
No.
Yeah, we will.
We'll have Gracie as a guest.
Yeah. We'll talk about Daria, too.
Yeah, I hear Daria right now. Daria wants to come on.
We said her name. She spoke. There she is again. All right. Well, she's telling me it's time to shut up and let you guys go back to your daily lives. Don't forget, if you guys are interested, we do have a lot of our new products on our website. We're doing custom can curtains. You can now order those through our website, airbornec9.com. We have all the e-collar technology products. We have our favorite finger clickers there. We have all of the mini educator systems. We do carry Dogtra as well. Dogtra just came out with a few new changes to their systems as well. If you weren't keeping up with the Dogtra news, they now have the boost option and a lock option, which they did not have previously. Yeah. We are also selling Star Mark products and Dakota 283 kennels.
If y'all don't have the Star Mark treat pouch, you are living the wrong life.
Dude, they were sold out for like a long time.
Because they're the best treat pouch ever.
I know, but we do have them, and if you want to order them, we will mail it to you. So if they are unavailable or sold out where you're looking, we have them. So let me know. Order it from us, airbornecanine.com. Don't forget, check out our YouTube channel. We're going to post this episode on YouTube, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. Check out our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We are getting TikTok famous, which is fantastic. I don't know why, because we are huge nerds. But we are getting there. And like, follow, share, subscribe. What?
My TikTok is kj.canines. I need more followers.
If you really want to follow mine, you can, but it's boring as all hell. It's Nerdy Dog Trainer. I don't know why I picked that name. Yeah, I know.
She says wearing her Apple Watch in analog mode.
It is an analog. It makes my brain think, okay? I get a new wrinkle every time I look at it.
I want my brain to look like a boneless, skinless chicken breast.
That's disgusting.
No winkles.
So weird. Oh my god. All right, until next time, folks, enjoy your day with your dog.